Have you thought, like, why isn't anyone talking about Windows 11? You think it's some new shiny operating system from Microsoft would be the buzz of the tech, right? But reality is that not exactly. And even though Windows 11 has been out for a while, it feels like nobody is in a big rush to jump on the new wagon of the new operating system. Windows 11 officially launched in October 2021, but if you look around, you won't find that many people using it. Like, as example, myself, I'm still running on a Windows 10. And that's surprising for a company like the Microsoft, which usually pushes its latest operating systems pretty hard, right? But here we are, almost 2 years in, or 3, right? And Windows 11 still seems like the one party everyone's are gonna ignore. So what's the deal? Why isn't everyone upgrading? Well, it's not just one reason, there's many. And there are a few key factors holding people back, from super strict hardware requirements that leave tons of computers out of the running Microsoft software upgrade tactics this time around, not to mention the fact that the Windows 11 doesn't really offer much new or exciting features, right? It's basically the same Windows 10. But that's not all. There's another deadline looming that could change things, like Windows 10 soon. I think it's 2025 October, then it's gonna go out of the support. So will that make people to change their minds and switch to the Windows 11? Let's dive in and try to understand that. And definitely one of the biggest reasons the Windows 11 hasn't taken off is the strict hardware requirements. And let me tell you, they're pretty strict. First off, let's talk about the CPU requirements. To upgrade to Windows 11, you need a relatively modern processor. We're talking like 8th generation Intel Core or AMD Ryzen 2000 or something later. If you're running on an older machine, even if it's just a few years old, you might not make the cut. And for a lot of users, this was an immediate roadblock. Microsoft has drawn a pretty firm line here, and that's left a lot of people in the cold. But the real kicker, that's the TPM 2.0. Ever heard about it? Most people hadn't until Windows 11 came along. TPM stands for Trusted Platform Module, and it's essentially a security chip that's either built into the modern computers or available as an add-on. The problem is, many older computers don't have TPM 2.0, and without it, Windows 11 isn't even an option. That's right, no TPM 2.0, no upgrade. And while some users might be able to enable TPM 2.0 by tweaking their BIOS settings, many people don't even know what a BIOS is, right? And they're definitely not comfortable messing with it. Now, Microsoft's argument is that these hardware requirements are meant to enhance security and performance. They claim that TPM 2.0 provides a more secure environment, protecting against things like firmware attacks, and sure, that makes sense on a paper, but the reality is, it left a huge chunk of computers, especially those bought just a few years ago, unable to upgrade. So even if people wanted to switch to the Windows 11, they simply can't. This is a sharp contrast to the Windows 10, which had much more lenient hardware requirements. Back then, Windows 10 launched, Microsoft made sure that pretty much any computer running Windows 7 or Windows 8 could make the jump. But with the Windows 11, they really narrowed the field. And for a lot of users, the hardware cutoff is a deal breaker. After all, who wants to buy a whole new computer just to get the latest operating system? Many users are happy sticking with what they have, especially since Windows 10 works just fine for the most people, just like it does for me. Like, all of the applications, all the software is running perfectly fine. So with Windows 11, Microsoft might have aimed for a higher security, but they also ended up alienating significant portion of their user base. Now, here's where things get interesting. Remember the days when Microsoft practically forced everyone onto Windows 10? They were relentless, constant pop-ups, sneaky updates, and accidental upgrades. For a while, I felt like you couldn't use your computer without Windows 10 elbowing its way in. There were a lot of videos when people are running some video rendering, and in the middle of the process, the upgrade to Windows 10 just kicks in without any warnings. But with Windows 11, that aggressive push is nowhere to be found. Microsoft has taken a noticeably softer approach this time around. Instead of bombarding users with non-stop upgrade prompts, they've been much more hands-off. There's no hard sell campaign, no nagging pop-ups, just an option to upgrade if your machine qualifies. And that's been a big factor in why so few people have made the switch. And I think the truth is that a lot of users don't feel any urgency to upgrade, especially without Microsoft breathing down their necks like they did with Windows 10. And while this more relaxed strategy might seem like a nice break, it also means that fewer users are motivated to make the jump on a Windows 11. So without the constant push, many are simply staying, put content to run their perfectly fine Windows 10 setups. And another thing is definitely lack of the new features. So what about them? You'd think a brand new operating system would come packed with exciting new tools and functionalities, right? Well, not exactly. Windows 11 doesn't really bring anything game-changing to the table. Yes, there are a few visual updates, the start menu has moved to the center, the edges of Windows are rounded, and there are some new sounds and icons. It looks cleaner, more modern, and well, kinda like reskinned version of the Windows 10, but when it comes to actual functionality, Windows 11 doesn't offer much that's different from what we've already seen. Take for example one of the headlining features, Snap Layouts. It's a handy tool that helps you organize windows on your screen more efficiently, but let's be real, you could already snap windows side by side in Windows 10. Windows 11 just adds a bit more customization to it. It's nice, but it's not exactly a reason to rush out and upgrade. And the same goes for the new widgets panel. It's a neat idea giving you quick access to news, weather, and your calendar, but again, this feels more like something that could have been added to Windows 10 as an update, rather than a full reason to switch operating systems. Oh boy, and then there's the Microsoft Store. It's been revamped to include more apps, including Android apps. This could have been a big deal, except it's not. Most users still get their apps from their browser, and for many, the Microsoft Store is simply an afterthought. Now try to remember and try to compare this to the transition from Windows 7 to Windows 10, which brought tons of new features like Cortana, a virtual assistant, and a completely redesigned start menu, or even Windows XP to Windows 7, which introduced a far sleeker interface and improved performance. By contrast, Windows 11 just doesn't have the same wow factor, right? It feels more like an incremental update than a groundbreaking leap forward. And for the most users, this lack of compelling new features isn't enough to make the switch worth it. If you're already comfortable with a Windows 10 and it's running smoothly on your machine, why bother upgrading to something that at first glance doesn't offer much more than a fresh coat of paint? Now here's a date everyone are using for a Windows 10 we should keep an eye on: October 14, 2025. That's when the Microsoft will officially stop supporting Windows 10. So what does that mean? No more security patches, no more updates, no more bug fixes. In other words, your system becomes vulnerable over time as the new threats emerge and your outdated operating system can be kept up. This looming deadline is probably the one thing that eventually push more people towards Windows 11, right? Whether they like it or not. But there's one thing that's still over a year away, so for the most users, there's no immediate pressure to upgrade. After all, why would I jump to the new system now when Windows 10 is still fully supported and working just fine? But as we inch closer to that 2025 cutoff, we can expect to see a much larger wave of people reluctantly making the switch to Windows 11. Some might even hold out until the very last moment, waiting for the all clear to jump ship. It's likely that the adoption rate of the Windows 11 will spike right before the Microsoft shuts the door on a Windows 10. And I guess it's time for the conclusion. So why isn't Windows 11 catching on? Well, it comes down to a mix of the factors. First, the hardware requirements are just too steep for a lot of users, with the need for a relatively new CPU and TPM 2.0 locking out a huge portion of older machines. Then there's the fact that the Microsoft hasn't been aggressive in pushing the upgrade as they were to Windows 10, leaving many users with little incentive to switch. And when you look at what Windows 11 actually offers, there isn't a whole lot of truly groundbreaking. Sure, it's got some nice visual upgrades and features like the snap layouts and widgets, but nothing that screams must have. For most people, Windows 11 feels like a slightly updated version of Windows 10, not enough to justify the hassle to upgrade, especially if their current setup works just fine. But with a Windows 10 end of the support date creeping up in 2025, we'll probably see more people making the switch, even if it's reluctantly. So what about you? Are you planning to upgrade to the Windows 11? Because I guess majority of the people watching this are on a Windows 10, just like me. And Please do tell me in the comments what are your plans, and don't forget to click subscribe, smash the like button, and we'll see you in the next videos. Thank you and goodbye.